I think that I've in some ways seen becoming an artist as my only option. There's always been this thing inside of myself that I want to get out. I had lots of things that were inside me that I wanted to say and express somehow, but they didn't necessarily come out in words. And I've always sort of found through art these ways.
Hello and welcome to the third season of the York Creatives podcast. Your chance to hear from the artists, designers, storytellers and business owners who make up York's creative community. My name is Ben Porter. I'm a photographer, musician and the founder of York Creatives. In this episode, I chat to Kimbal Bumstead, a multidisciplinary artist working across painting, drawing, video, performance and sound. His work explores notions of imagined and reimagined landscapes, abstraction as a form of storytelling, and mark making as a tool to tune in to sensory, emotional and embodied experiences. Kimbal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So do you want to set the scene for us? Do you want to tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm an artist. I work with a variety of media, from painting and drawing all the way through to performance and music and installation, video. Yeah, and I've recently moved to York, and I'm mostly at the moment working on music.
So multi-talented person then?
Thanks. I hope so. Yeah, I like.
Well, I've seen your artwork. Your artwork is very good. I've not
Thanks.
yet heard your music, but if it's as good as your artwork, then I'm assuming it's pretty good. Thanks.
It's hard. The music is, I don't know. It's hard to define in a way. You know, like it's hard to put it into genres of what the music really is. It's, and I'm not really, I'm not really a musician. I'm somebody who likes sound and
Okay, fairly experimental then.
It's kind of experimental, yeah. It's made with field recordings,
Okay.
So I'm interested in working with things and turning them into other things. So I do that.
So like a sound artist.
Yes,
Okay.
in a sense, yeah. Although I'm still a bit kind of shy about giving myself that term or giving myself that title, because it's a new thing for me working with sound. But I've made a few tracks recently, which I would consider as being music. One of them's been released on a vinyl, which I'm quite proud about.
Many people are musicians for their entire life and never get something onto vinyl, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was lucky.
How did that come about?
I had a friend of mine. She runs a record label together with another couple of friends, and I just sent her my track that I'd finished, not really with the intention of it. I didn't think that she would want to release it or something. I just wanted to send it to her, and then she was like, "Oh, I really like it. It's great. I'd like to, put this on our next compilation." So it's now part of a compilation of really, quite very diverse electronic music. It's the label is Erbium Records. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of all about music that's about the elements of the earth and being in touch with raw materials of earth and acid melting fusion sort of chemistry. There's kind of like
there's a lot going on there
behind the thing, and I relate to that idea a lot, with my work, and some of the stuff that I've been doing with sound, which is very much about using the materials of the earth, making recordings of sounds that exist, thinking about the earth as a raw material that you can work with to create sound, recreate sound.
Okay. So we'll dig into your work a bit more soon. Before we get there though, I'd like to go back to the beginning. So when did your creative journey begin?
So I went to art school, but I don't know if that's really where it started. It's a difficult question. Where does it start?
What made you want to go to art school?
My art teacher at school was a very influential person. Well, both of them had two art teachers at high school. And before going to university, I was I was initially wanting to study anthropology or architecture, and I remember both of my high school art teachers saying to me, you should go and study art. Like, what are you doing? You're crazy not to study art. because I mean I was always interested in art. Like at school, I did I did my final piece for my A levels was a video where I was I'd created this big pile of mud in the garden, and I was mixing the mud with white paint.
Okay.
And then I kind of got into the mud and started rolling around in it, and kind of I was creating this mud painting on the floor, and I filmed it, and then I made a painting, which it was a really cool piece actually. I wish I had a photo of it. It was like a structure that was sort of wooden structure with all these sort of windows in it, and I painted onto some plastic sheets this kind of effect that was meant to look like water dripping into, like when you put ink into water and it sort of dissolves. So I was kind of interested in that idea of chance happenings, like the water dissolving, or the ink dissolving in the water, and then the paint dissolving into the mud, and then me sort of going into it. So I was kind of going into the painting. So in a way, thinking about it, that was...
That's quite complex for someone who's still at school.
Yeah, I was 18. Yeah, or 17 must have been, yeah.
So do you think that's what the art teachers saw in you, someone who could think multidimensionally?
I think so. Yeah, yeah. They were always really convinced that I should go to art school. And I mean, I've always been interested in art and making things. But I wasn't convinced. I think that I had this voice in the back of my head, that was like, oh, I shouldn't go and study art because it's not gonna. It's going to be pointless. I'm never going to get a job or whatever, which is, eventually true. At the age
Don't say that.
At the age of, how old am I? 37, and still figuring that out. But but I'm glad I did it. I think it was a really good decision to do it, and I think it's my parents were always very supportive of me as well. They never said, don't go and study art. But I do feel like it was a good thing to do. To go and study.
So, what were some of the early influences on you then before art school?
I mean, I always liked drawing and painting. It was I always liked doing those things. I liked experimenting with things. Like I got really. I remember one of the really sort of the things I got really interested in at school was land art. Like I remember being really obsessed about Richard Long, and then doing looking up all the land artists from the.
So you have to explain that.
So land art is basically using the nature as a material, as a raw material. So instead of making a landscape painting, it's making a painting with the landscape.
Okay, cool.
So I've always kind of been interested in that kind of idea. And Richard Long did things like walking along a line, treading footsteps along a line to make a path. So kind of walking backwards and forwards along the same path, and then it's like a path made by walking. And I remember really liking that kind of, and Andy Goldsworthy as well, who's I remember really liking his work. He did stuff with stones, like stone, what are they called, cairns, when you balance stones on top of each other. Okay, and stuff like leaving coloured leaves in lines and patterns, so like creating sort of visual forms on the ground. And I remember kind of really liking that idea and wanting to try to create stuff like that. So in our garden, we had what was it? There was a little path. There was a path. How did I do it? Oh, there was a path. There used to be a path, and then there was these paving slabs in the garden, or like small bits, stones or something, small slabs. And I remember putting them all in a line and then leaving them in the line, and then letting the grass underneath them die, so that there was this kind of, and then after a couple of weeks taking the stones off, and then there was this dead line of grass. But I put them in the same line as there was a wall sticking into the garden, and I let that line sort of extend out into the garden. So it was this kind of line of the wall and then the line of dead grass.
As I was about to say, it's like a living installation, but in your case, it's a dying installation.
In that case, yes, yeah. And then I did the other something else with apples. So I got there was an apple tree, which again on the theme of death it was full of dead apples. The tree in the garden never had it was diseased. In fact there were 3 trees. But there were two apple trees and 1 pear tree, and all of them gave rotten fruit. So you'd get like these rotten fruits that would drop.
Well, at least you made art out of them.
I did. Yeah, it was fun. So yeah, so that was definitely something that I was interested in, and I think still resonates with me. You know, that kind of practices of using landscape as a raw material, but also music. I mean, I've always, like, as much as music now is very much a new part of my practice, or at least I'm kind of considering it as a new part of my practice, it's actually always been there. You know, I've always been interested in sound, and doing stuff with sound, making sounds. I've always been a bit shy about like playing guitar. I never really dared to play. I played guitar in a band when I was 14, but it was never really kind of serious, and I never really trusted myself to do it. But I always liked beatboxing to myself when I was like cycling along, or like humming to myself, or like making up sounds. But I never sung because I didn't dare to sing. But I liked expressing myself with my voice and using.
I was the same.
What are you?
Yeah, I've been playing guitar since I was 7, so like 21 years, and never sang. I think I had a bad experience when I was maybe like in year 6. So how old are you there? Like 9, where the teacher made me stand up in front of the class and sing something.
Oh man!
And I just remember how, because I was into music, I knew I wasn't a good singer. And to me, that was just like, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And so to have to do something in front of people and know it's not very good, that was just like crushing. Yeah. And I didn't sing again until I was like 23 or something.
Oh, man.
So the last few years I've been taking a few lessons and getting back into it. But yeah, I would always be mumbling things to myself, beatboxing, tapping on things, but never sang. So that's an interesting link there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very. But it's true, because the voice is something that's so. It's a very powerful thing. It's something that's very. It's almost like the doorway between what's inside your body.
It's incredibly personal.
And yeah, it's like, and I've always been quite a shy person. You know, I've never really liked, speaking out loud in class. Like I've never really liked. Because I felt that, as soon as you open your mouth, as soon as you have something, as soon as you say something, then it's your mind which is coming out. It's your voice is like this doorway into your mind. Whereas if you're quiet, then you can kind of,
slip under the radar.
Exactly. So and I'm not really very. Well, I think of myself as a quiet person. My girlfriend says that I talk all the time. But
most people are quiet until you get them relaxed, and suddenly they open up, and there's loads of stuff there which they've never talked about, which they just need to get off their chest.
Yeah, well, I'm probably one of these people. Yeah.
Yeah, well, sometimes you get an opportunity to talk about this stuff on a podcast. Well, but we're going to dig into some of that. So cool. You're somebody who is obviously very insanely curious. You see all these things around you, you see patterns and things, you like to make things. But then at the same time, like most artists, there's a worry there about if you open up and share what's inside of you, then somebody might come back and question that or attack it. And I think that's something that we all relate to. So then how did you then take that and then decide to pursue the path of an artist? Because that's going to create some tension there. So talk me through that process.
That's an interesting point. I think that I've in some ways seen becoming an artist as my only option. There's always been this thing inside of myself that I want to get out somehow and communicate. And I never felt that I had anything to say, in conversations with like friends. And they never knew anything about what was going on TV. Like I didn't know anything about like, famous people, whatever. Like I never had something to say, but I felt that I had lots of things that were inside me that I wanted to say and express somehow, but they didn't necessarily come out in words, or in terms of like general knowledge or whatever. So I kind of, I guess, was really like when I did the thing with the the thing I mentioned with the mud and, rolling around in the mud. And I kind of almost was like, when I did that, what was I, 17 or something? And of course, I knew that people would think that was weird. And partly I knew that it was weird, and partly because it was weird, I liked it, and I sort of felt like, okay, that's a way that I can actually express myself by being weird. I've always hated fancy dress parties. Because I've been shy about what to wear. I never thought I'd come up with a good costume. I once went to a fancy dress party dressed in a just a bin bag. Because I was like, because I wanted to go in a bin bag, and I thought that it would be, I don't know. I don't even know what I thought, but I was like, okay, I'm going to just be a bin bag.
It's fascinating how these things manifest themselves, because I relate exactly to what you were saying about sometimes not having the words to say things, but thinking you've got a lot to say. And for me, it was often I would need some time to reflect on what's happened before coming up with some kind of response. And for me, I would find that through making little films or through making music or whatever. But for me, it was always the editing afterwards where I kind of crafted the voice. But then you said the thing about dressing up, and I was a kid who liked weird things too, but then when it was like non-uniform day at school, where you're supposed to just come in like your normal clothes, I would come in like full eye makeup and like spiky wristbands and like red stuck-up hair.
Nice.
And like just wanted to show that I was different to anybody else. And like that wasn't even fancy dress, but I looked like I was in fancy dress. Everyone was like, "What's wrong with Ben? Why is he wearing that?"
But was that your real self coming out, do you think?
It was one of myself, which sounds terribly pretentious to say. But I think because I had different groups of friends, like some friends we would dress like that if we would go out skating or whatever. And some of the bands we would listen to would dress like that. And so to me, it felt slightly rebellious, but not completely rebellious, as in if I had worn a bin bag, to me, I had no reference point for people who wore bin bags. And so that would be even more rebellious. But it's quite a visual thing when you put eye makeup on and wear spiky wristbands.
Yeah.
People are like, "What's wrong with that kid? Is he depressed?" Which is kind of the go-to response from people.
I mean, I had this sort of spiky wristband phase as well, and the big baggy jeans and the chain and the Nirvana hoodie and
Well, that was just the 90s, wasn't it?
But it was like, I think that that's like a kind of buying into some sort of the you looking for an identity. But I think that in a way I kind of felt that there were things that I wanted that I had inside. There were things that I wanted to try to get out of me, but didn't really know how to do it. And I've always sort of found through art, these ways, of doing that. Like I used to love, sitting and working on a painting for like hours. I remember my sketchbook, because at school in A levels and what you always have to keep the sketchbook and show your working progress and stuff. Like now my sketchbook is like just scribbles. I never bother. Work like the sketchbook is literally just like notes most of the time. But at school, I remember spending like 12 hours, on one page of a sketchbook, kind of going really sort of detailed into this like amazing painting of a nut or something, and then kind of doing all the borders and really presenting it really nice. And I'm really sloppy now, because the sketchbook is just for me, whereas that was very much for, having to show something.
And so, story-wise, we've got to the point where we've established that you're obviously very interested in art. There's been teachers who have encouraged you to go to art school. You get to art school, and I guess at that point you meet all these other creative people. What were your thoughts in terms of when you go into a new place, you always try and work out the people around you, how you relate to them? Was it an experience of, oh, great, there's loads of people like me? Or was it an experience of, oh, here's loads of competition, I'm not sure how I feel about this? Talk me through that. I
really liked it, that I was around people that were kind of, wanting to do similar stuff. I mean, I also I had friends at school also who were creative as well. One of them actually came on the same course as me, and that was actually really nice that we were together. But I thought that it was. I mean, I never felt this sense of competition. I think it might be more the case nowadays when there's just like so many students. I mean, already when on my course we had how many were there? Like 40, I think, in the first year, and then it sort of went up to 50, and I think now they have, I don't know how many people per year group, like 60, 70, something like that.
Wow.
And I think probably, for the art schools in London, it's probably even crazier, in terms of competition. But I never really saw it in terms of competition, at least not then. I just thought that it was really nice to be in an environment where you could just like do weird things. I remember we had I was introduced to the work of Sophie Calle. Do you know how
I do not.
She's she did things like she had a project about stalking. So she went and stalked somebody and then made a sort of artworks about her stalking this person, sort of like taking photos of them from their window.
Wow.
But there, I think, I don't know. I think there's a kind of kinky element to it in a sense. I mean, I think that there is a kinky element to the idea of being stalked, unless it's actually malicious. But I remember we did a project about her, and we had a group of people, and we all went to Weatherby, for the day, and just went and tried to stalk each other. So we walked around the town and
Okay.
like on our own, and tried to kind of, we each had a person that we were going to stalk. And,
It's a different thing when everybody's stalking everybody.
Yeah.
It's,
No,
it's
no,
like
exactly.
some strange game.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah,
you-
it was more like a strange game in
Yeah.
a way. But then I realized, there's so many things that you can, art is a game. There's so many games that you can play with art. You set yourself sort of weird rules that you can follow or break.
And games are the best way to get you to think in a different way. I mean, they're working that out now in education, aren't they? Like so many things. Like when you pick up a new video game, there's no instructions. The game teaches you how to play it, and it's so much more engaging. And people are, the people are doing education really well now. They're thinking, how can I teach this in a way to the students that doesn't have them sat there just listening to a bunch of text that's been recited out, which I imagine art has picked up for a long time, because it's very difficult to learn art from a textbook, isn't it? You've got to actually do it. You've got to go through a process and things like that. So were there any key lessons that you learned at art school which really set you up for a career in art?
And
And you can answer it any way you want. Be as honest as possible.
No, it's funny because the one the one thing the first thing that springs to mind is a class when we were asked how many of you think that you're going to be artists, and there was only 3 people in the room that put their hands up. I was one of them, and I mean I think that I'm not sure. I think the sentiment behind that question was like, be realistic. Most people who go to art school will not go on to be artists, because it's a really difficult world. And yeah, it is a really difficult world, which I've figured out.
What made you put your hand up?
Self-assurance, maybe.
And where did that come from?
I think I've just always been, I've always just been very single-minded about wanting to be an artist, and I've always kind of, as much as I in the beginning was a bit sort of, nervous. Do I go to art school? Do I not? I've always just thought that this is the thing that I want to do, and it's the thing that I've always just like put all of my energy into, wanting to be. And I think that, like, if anything, that's the thing that I've learned from going to university to study art is really just, you have to just keep at it. You have to keep being an artist. If you want to be an artist, you have to be an artist. You have to just keep on.
It's a process,
doing
not
it.
a lifestyle.
Yeah, I mean, it's there is a lifestyle to it, but it's not a romantic
if that's
thing.
why you're doing it, it's probably going to fall apart.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that, one of the things that I like, I've never been a person that sort of was desperate for money. I'm not a money hungry person, and that's not like my drive, which is convenient, I guess, as an artist, because well, is it? I'm also a terrible businessman, so that doesn't that doesn't help. But I've always just kind of found ways of trying, keeping at it, kind of other jobs on the side, just finding ways to keep it going, and then and it's a tough career path, because there's never like a guaranteed income, really.
But that's almost part of the process. Sometimes you get artists who completely remove themselves from the world and then they have nothing to say. And it's like the best writers are the ones who've lived the most interesting lives. They've continued to work jobs as they write. Yeah.
No, that's true. One of my jobs, sort of on-off jobs throughout since studying, actually, is being a life model for drawing classes, which has always been kind of quite interesting in a sense. I've actually always enjoyed.
Okay, tell me about the first time you did that.
First time was I was doing my master's, so that's about 12 years ago now. God, yeah, time flies. I was nervous. I was nervous but excited.
Mm-hmm. So well. Just to clarify, is life model always nude?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, not. I mean, you can. You can volunteer to.
But usually it is.
But I always did it nude, and I wasn't sort of. I'm not worried about being naked in front of people. Like I've never sort of been shy about my body in that sense. So I was interested to see what it would be like. What's it like to go and take your clothes off in front of a room full of people. And I was a bit nervous about it, because I was just like, oh God, what if I get a boner or whatever? It's like, it's going to be really embarrassing. What if there's somebody that I fancy in the room? And which didn't happen, obviously, because it doesn't happen. And everyone was very respectful, and it was just a very empowering experience, actually, because you're performing. You're kind of controlling the situation. You're not exactly controlling it, but you are, in a sense. You're always, you're the center of attention, in a sense. You're the people who are drawing you are sort of looking at what you have composed with your body.
So do you get to decide how you sit or lie or stand?
Yeah, it depends. Like sometimes the tutor has an idea of what they want to do. Like maybe they want a sort of more angular pose, or something more standing or sitting or whatever, or sometimes with the more long-term poses, like I've done long pose modeling, which is basically where you're standing for like 4 weeks in the same position.
How
like
long per day?
60 hours in total, or is it even longer? 120. It's like blocks of 3 hours. So
okay.
20 minutes break, 20 minutes, 20 minutes model, 5 minutes break, 20 minutes pose, and then there'll be like a 15-minute long break. That's what they call it, the long break, and then another, for 3 hours, and then. It's crazy. But the drawings that they make are incredible, sort of hyper realistic. They count every rib, they watch you breathe. And I've never really been into drawing. That's absolute rubbish. I draw in my practice, but I've never been into sort of figurative drawing.
Okay.
At least I haven't done it very much recently, especially not that sort of super realistic stuff. But it has really taught me a lot about painting, and about composition, and about sort of about looking, and it's interesting being the person who's looked at. Like I always thought it would feel really voyeuristic, or that you feel really observed, but the funny thing is that when you're standing there naked in front of people, you almost feel as though you're not there. You're almost like somewhere else. You know, you can see all these people who are looking, but you're like, what are they looking at? What are they doing? You know, you're because you're just there, you know, in your own thoughts, you know, drifting off. And, you know, thinking about stuff like what are you going to have for dinner tonight, or well, how am I going to build those shelves that I've been planning to make, or, you know, oh yeah, I really wanted to do that project about sound. Maybe I should do that. And I'm fantasizing about, you know, going off to Scotland and hitchhiking and whatever, you know. So it's almost like this kind of out of body experience in a sense that you're there, you're in the center, but you're yeah, but physically it's also tough, and it can be really boring as well.
Sure.
After time. But,
well, that's why you get paid.
Yeah.
So
it's a job after all.
So how does someone who self-describes as shy volunteer themselves for that? How do you reconcile the two things together? Because most people would say a shy person wouldn't put themselves forward for that.
Yeah, no, that's true. The funny thing is that I don't feel shy about my body. Like I feel more shy about, and I've overcome it. Like I don't feel really shy about. I mean, I wouldn't be here if I was like, I'm going to be recorded. Jesus. But I found that with the nudity thing, I kind of always just told myself I'm just a body. You know, you're just a body in a space. You don't need to worry about anything. You don't need to worry about, you know, what people are thinking of you, or what their reaction is gonna be, because you're just, at the end of the day, you're just a body. Everybody is just a body, and you're a body just as much as, you know, everyone else is in the room.
It's not like anybody sat there. Yeah, and it's not like anybody who sat there is going to be like, "Oh, you're naked. What are you doing? Why are you naked?" It's like they all know. I have done modelling for hen parties. Okay, that's a whole different experience. Is that modelling, or is that something else? Well, it's so basically they I've seen that they have it here as well in York. They're basically like you as a hen party activity, and they do it for. Oh, they're still drawing you. Yeah, they're drawing. Yeah, okay. So right. At stag parties, that's important to clarify that they are drawing. Yeah, they're drawing. So it's like it's a hired event. You know, you come and they have like instead of there being a stripper, there's a model for doing drawing, and then they draw. You know, and most of the time they've never drawn before, and they find it hilarious. And then they get they get drunk, and then they kind of giggle, and it's a horrible experience. It also pays like 5 times more. So I can imagine. Swings and roundabouts, but that's the only time that I felt looked at and uncomfortable perhaps about being looked at for, you know, at that kind of event when you're being looked at sort of objectively, you know, because they're not there because they're interested in drawing per se. They're there because it's a hen party, and because they're drinking, and because it's like a fun activity, and there's a naked man and all. But it's all life experience. It's life experience. It's, you know, it's fun. I think it's good. You know, it's fun. It's fun to have. Sometimes I'm like, but it would be great, you know, if I'm reading a book at the moment by an artist whose work that I really like. He's called Brian Ruttenberg, and he is a painter, abstract painter, and he paints landscapes. Really colourful, abstract landscapes. They're beautiful, and he talks about his life and how he became an artist, and, you know, his journey, his trajectory of, you know, going to art school and sort of working constantly. Sort of, you know, he's got, you know, he has a, you know, he was lucky enough to be given a studio at his art school, and his tutors kind of really liked him and really supported him, and he was given his own space, and, you know, he got picked up by, you know, various collectors, and, you know, but he really worked constantly. He would sleep in the studio at night time, and, you know, he would be working sort of 18 hours a day, you know, but sort of, and you know, he describes his sort of starting out his career as being quite, you know,
tense, but then at the same time, you know, he has had and now has a very successful career, you know, and sometimes you think like, oh yeah, well, you know, I wish I was as successful as him, kind of thing. But you can't compare yourself to other people.
What does success mean to you?
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's a good question, really. I mean, I think that the obvious answer of success being related to you know, financial gain and recognition is not really. It is a huge part of it, and I think that it plays a huge part on your mindset, or, you know, how you define yourself as an artist. You know, if you're being recognized, then that's a good thing. Whereas, like, just, you know, achieving what you set out to, or kind of like achieving milestones, or resolving, you know, problems that you've set for yourself, that is surely a form of success. And I think that it's definitely something that, you know, needs to be taken into account. And I know that, you know, I tell myself, you know, success is not about money. Success is not about fame or whatever. And I've never really been interested in being famous, to be fair. I've never really, I never wanted to be famous. I was because I didn't want to be in the limelight. You know, that kind of idea. It's not something I've ever strived for, and won't really. So I think that the success is sort of, you know, when you feel like you've made something good. You know, you've kind of shared something with people, and people have liked it. But then every time I sell a painting, I get really excited. You know, I'm like, oh, brilliant. Yeah, I sold a painting. That's great. I can pay the rent again this month. You know, like, and it's, but it is exciting. You know, there is some sense of, like, you know, being recognized. You know, somebody's willing to pay money for something that you have created. You know, and money is something that doesn't grow on trees. It comes from hard work most of the time, unless you're, you know, investment banker, or, you know,
yeah,
which is still work. It's still not disrespecting anything. But
is what you're saying that the money and the recognition and things like that is helpful? It's not the entire point, but it adds momentum to the journey.
It does, yeah. It does add momentum, and I think that it's you know, it's good that, like, I think that it's good that I still get excited, you know, about selling something. Because if selling something just became like, I don't know, receiving my paycheck, you know, at the end of the month, and, oh God, you know, I've got to go back to work again, then I think that it would completely kill it for me. You know, I think there has to be a bit of struggle, you know, and excitement about achieving something. And it's not just to do with money. It's also, you know, to do with you know, getting into an exhibition, or you know, having something that you've written published, or whatever. Like, I think that all these, like, measures of success, you know, of you know, being being recognized by other people for, you know, that what you have created is valuable, not just in economic sense, but also in terms of, I don't know, valuable enough for somebody to sit down and read it or listen to it.
It reduces the loneliness a bit, doesn't it? Because to be creative is often, it's quite a solitary practice, and you go off into your mind, or you go out exploring and you find all these influences, and then you combine them together and you make something, and you might think it's amazing, but if nobody reacts, it's like, oh, okay, I'll try again. And if you keep doing that and nobody responds, it's like, am I just wasting my time here? But then when somebody goes, oh no, I see what you're making there, like, I connect with that, it's like, I wasn't wasting my time. There is something on this. I need to keep going. Yeah,
no, it's an amazing feeling. I love it when people, you know, at the Open Studios, like the York Open Studios, the last weekend, 2 weekends ago, it was amazing seeing people kind of really relating to my work. And, you know, a lot of the time I was talking to them, but sometimes I the people who came. But sometimes I just sat back on the chair at some point towards the end, because it was crazy busy, and at some point I was like, okay, I can't talk to everybody. So I sat down, and it was a really interesting thing to watch, and actually a very special thing to be able to see people engaging with my work, not standing next to me and being like, oh, is this your work? Yeah, that's great. Or maybe they're just saying that because I'm there, but just, I'm sitting in the back, I'm sitting as an observer, observing people engaging with my work. And I thought that was a really special feeling, to be able to, it's almost that's kind of out of body experience. I'm not here, the fly on the wall sort of situation. And seeing that people get into it, and I mean, it's obvious, it's also really nice when you hear from people that they are relating to what you've done, and it's not always positive. I mean, I've heard that people apparently people either loved it or hated it. That's the word that I've heard.
Well, that's the response that you want, though, because if everybody's in the middle, then you're not doing anything right.
No.
And I think not all has to be divisive, but often you need a line in the sand somewhere for people to know if they are buying into it or not. I mean, I heard something the other day saying you can't have an insider group without having outsiders. And I think lots of artists feel bad about that because we want to be inclusive with the stuff that we make. But then often the only reason somebody buys something and puts it on the wall is to say, I like this is me, this relates to my personality. And you're not going to get that with something that's very middle of the road. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's definitely one of the things that, like, I struggle with to a certain extent with my work is that it's quite challenging. I'm talking about my painting specifically, although it might be the case for my music as well.
Let's stick with paintings and then we'll go into music.
They're not like easy pieces. Mm-hmm. A lot of them they're things you wouldn't want to have in your house. They're challenging. Because I think at the end of the day, most people who buy art want to have something that they can live with. Not all. Some people, but I'm talking about people who, have something for their wall.
So unpack that a bit. Why are they difficult? Why are they unusual?
They're complex. There's a lot going on in them. Partly it's the colours, which are quite intense. There's a lot of layers. There's a lot of information. There's a lot going on in them. Like on the surface, there's a lot of movement. There are shapes and there are blocks of colour, which are kind of interacting with each other, and they're flowing into each other. But they're also very busy. They're not calming. There's not like there's one painting that I showed at the Open Studios, which was like very minimal. It's a sort of like orangey, amber coloured painting that was with sort of two different types of varnish that are sort of it looks like it's kind of melting, but ultimately it's just orange with a black stripe on the side. It's very minimal, and it was the most popular painting. Like the one I got the most feedback from. They're like, "Oh, I like that one," whereas the other ones are like very dense. There's some of them particularly are really chaotic. There's lots of scratching and you kind of get lost in them, but some of them maybe make you feel a bit uncomfortable even. And some of them, I feel like the most successful paintings are the ones which are busy enough to get you absorbed into them. And it was really interesting actually just sitting and watching people kind of like staring at them, and being like, and then like turning their head and then doing a double take and be like, what's that? Because I think a lot of the time people think abstract art is just like whatever, it's just like shapes and whatever. You know, a lot of people don't think it's very interesting because they can't see anything in it. You know, they don't know what they're looking at, and they look for things that they recognize. Like they want to see like a shape that reminds them of a dog, or you know,
Yeah.
or like these colors are here because it makes me happy, you know, or something like that. But for me, the thing that I like about abstract stuff is not trying to see stuff which is recognizable, like pictorial representation, but just like completely getting absorbed into the way in which the shapes relate to each other. So like looking at, you know, this little pink blob over here and how it relates to this green, you know, splodge over there, and then seeing that sort of line that is coming up here, and then, you know, joining up to a shape here, which then connects to that one, and, you know, so like there's this kind of movement. Your eyes are kind of constantly drawn around the painting and sort of looking at this, and then and then that relates to that bit, and that relates. So they're really, you know, they're really complex. And I think that complexity is what makes them good. Like I think that they're successful. Like there's certain like. You know, I think that I'm proud of them, and I'm happy to, you know, to put my name on it, you know, and that I think that they're successful paintings.
Yeah, so I can see how you've gone from that to music then, because the way that you were describing how an abstract is put together, it's very much, it's a composition, and talking about people often wanting something specific to relate to them, and then there perhaps being more emotional content when it isn't there. For me, that just reminds me that the music that I find I relate to more on an emotional level, that's much deeper. It never has any lyrics. It's always instrumental music. And that it's probably because of what it does. There being no story, my brain creates a story based off the inputs I'm getting. That's always so much stronger than when somebody is there telling me, you know, their story, which can be really beautiful. But it's never as strong as the stories we have in our own heads, is it?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I mean, that kind of brings it back to what we were talking about earlier about the, you know, about singing and about, you know, wanting to speak, and, you know, the voice being a kind of a gateway into your mind. You know, it's very direct. Words have very specific meanings, and which can also be interpreted in different ways. But I'm the same. Like I've never really listened to lyrics of music. Although ironically, you know, I could probably, you know, sing you Britney Spears songs or whatever, because I had, you know, like sometimes you know, there's these lyrics that get sort of drilled into your head in a sense. But I've never really thought about the meaning of the words. I was more interested in sounds as well. So those sounds, yeah, and I think that the stuff that I'm making at the moment is very abstract. You know, the music is there is a story, and I definitely think that I compose the tracks that I've made with a narrative. Like there's definitely a narrative structure to it. Like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's like there's a kind of crucial point where it changes and then it morphs into another direction. So there is a narrative, and it's definitely got a start and a finish. And like it's electronic music, and it's somehow sits within techno loosely, but it's not dance music. Really, like, I mean, I find it's got a good groove, you know, that like I, you know, bob my head to it, but I can't imagine it being played in a club, you know. But I try it every time. I kind of sit down. It's like, okay, I'm gonna make like a dance track. I can't do it. I just can't do it. Like my brain, because I keep on adding like all these complexity, like with the paintings, you know, I keep on adding like extra sounds and like extra layers and sort of another layer that goes off here and there's some. So like it's music that you have to like sit down and listen to.
So it's not a copy and paste job?
Definitely not. No.
You don't strike me as a copy and paste type of guy, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no. I have done some, like, the only time I do copy and paste with the music is with where there's like a little, because what I've been doing is making loops from kind of field recordings that have some rhythms in them. So like, for instance, there was like a bit where there was like a clicking boiler or something, and I've taken just like a small fragment of this click, and it's like like that, and then I copy and paste that bit, but then I'll end up kind of modifying some of them and, you know, changing it again and turning it backwards. And but no, they're really, like, I've watched some videos of, like, you know, techno producers, you know, making stuff on Ableton, and I look at their projects, and they're all really neat, you know, sort of like you know, 4 bars here, 4 bars there, curve line, 4 bars. And it's like, wow, how do they do that? I'm just like, I can't work like that. Yeah, it's very much like building the story as I go, in a sense.
Yeah. So what would you say is your balance at the moment between visual art and music, time-wise?
I'd say it's about 50-50.
Okay. And are you fairly happy with that? Does that feel like a good place to be?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I've had a bit of a hiatus from painting, mostly because, well, for various reasons. But I usually sort of go in waves anyway with like my productivity with painting. Like I have times when I'm really active and busy, you know, like 3 months, kind of like intense, working every day, making tons of paintings, and then taking a break from it and working on something else. And I have been sort of, I've had quite a long break from painting, but I've restarted again. And I'm kind of seeing, I'm now seeing working with sound and working with painting kind of on the same level, in a sense. Maybe just because I feel that, like, I've often thought of the working with sound as being something that was almost frivolous if I spend my time working on the sound stuff. It's like, oh, well, you know, that's just like a hobby, or, you know, that's just like something, you know, I can't give myself, I'm not granting myself time to work on that. Whereas I've had a bit of a shift recently. It's like, well, why not? You know, if you're going to spend all that time on working on a painting, why not, you know, work on music? Because it's also something that you do.
Do you bounce off one into the other?
Yes, I do, actually. Yeah, I have found. I mean, one thing that I've found is that I definitely think of, like, the way that I kind of work with sound is very similar to how I work with a painting. So, like, I kind of, when I begin a piece of artwork, I have an idea in my head of what I'd like it to sound like or look like, and then I sort of start with my basic. You know, when I'm painting, I start with like a basic outline, and I like, okay, I'm going to have a blue thing here and a red thing there, but through the process, it ends up becoming something completely different. And the same with sound. So, you know, I have an idea in my head when usually it's like, yeah, I'm going to make a dance track. And then it's like, but then I'll find like some really interesting kind of like strange rhythm in a thing, in you know, in a recording. And then, you know, I realized that if I, you know, slow down this, you know, pitch down this recording of a bird, it's turned into this kind of really like, woo, kind of like warping sound. And then, you know, like, oh no, it's going to be ambient, you know, or it's going to go into the. So it keeps on evolving. You know, I never stick to my plan, but I like having a plan to be able to go from it. So I do feel that having the two, you know, painting and you know, working with sound simultaneous is definitely, you know, one definitely feeds into the other one in a sense. And also, you know, in terms of mood. Like I'm in quite a like dark mood at the moment. Like I've been working a lot with lots of blacks, different shades of black in my paintings, with just like small bits of color. And I feel that the music is also very dark with like little hints of color.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of crossovers there, I think.
Yeah, sounds right up my street.
I'll send you some links.
Perfect. So yeah, where can other people go if they want to find out more about your music and your art?
So I'm in the process of redoing my website at the moment. It's a big mess at the moment. It's a shambles. But my website is kimbalbumstead.com. And I'm on SoundCloud. And my name on SoundCloud is Kimbal. It's Kim, and then BAL has square brackets around it. And
Okay, cool.
Kimbal.
We'll put the link in the description so people can just click through.
Yeah, that'll be easier.
Cool. Do you have anything else that you would like to say to the audience before we wrap up?
I'm glad to have had a chance to have a chat with you about these things. It's nice to be here. Appreciate that you're doing this project, and I'm grateful to you for inviting me to be here.